Part 1. The dinner invitation extended. 1,000 words. The city lights shimmered outside as Evelyn checked her reflection in the mirror one last time. The rain had just stopped, leaving streaks across the glass. And the sound of dripping water echoed faintly in the quiet apartment. She wasn't nervous exactly, but her heart felt heavier than usual. Tonight wasn't just another dinner. It was something different. Daniel, her boyfriend of 3 years, had planned this evening for weeks. They were hosting their closest friends, Mia and Lucas, a couple they'd known since college. They hadn't all sat together in months, and somehow, Evelyn felt like this dinner might open something they hadn't talked about in a long time. When Daniel stepped out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel, she smiled. He looked calm, collected, like always. "They'll be here soon," he said, his tone soft but expectant. Evelyn nodded, adjusting the candle on the small dining table. The warm glow filled the room, softening the walls, making everything feel smaller, more intimate. The faint smell of roasted garlic and herbs floated through the air, mixing with the faint sweetness of the wine Daniel had already opened. The knock came exactly at 7. Mia's cheerful voice filled the hallway as Daniel opened the door. "Finally. You two still look like you stepped out of a movie," she teased, handing over a bottle of wine. Lucas followed behind her, smiling but quiet as always. He had a way of watching without saying much, as if he liked observing how people moved, talked, and reacted. Evelyn welcomed them in with a hug, laughing softly. "It's been too long," she said, and it truly had. The last few months had been heavy work stress, missed calls, plans canceled. This dinner felt like a return to something simple, something real. As they sat down, conversation flowed easily at first. Stories about work, travels, and the small struggles of adult life. Mia's laughter filled the space like sunlight. Daniel told a story about burning an entire batch of cookies, and everyone laughed until their sides hurt. For a while, it felt like old times. But slowly, as the night deepened, something subtle began to shift. The laughter softened. The pauses between words grew longer. Evelyn noticed how Mia's eyes lingered when Daniel spoke, not in a romantic way, but in curiosity, like she was watching something familiar and rare. Lucas sat back, silent but smiling faintly, his gaze moving between Evelyn and Daniel. Evelyn could feel their attention, not intrusive, not judgmental, just observant. It was strange, but it didn't make her uncomfortable. It was as if the two of them were seeing something Evelyn herself had forgotten. The quiet way Daniel looked at her, the way their hands found each other without thinking, the unspoken understanding that had grown between them over the years at one point. Daniel turned to her and said something small. "You still remember that night at the cabin?" And she laughed, a sound so genuine that even Mia's eyes softened. There was history in that laugh, and everyone in the room could feel it. Dinner stretched on longer than expected. The storm outside had passed, but the sky still glowed with faint lightning far away. The air in the apartment felt alive, like the night itself was paying attention. Evelyn poured another glass of wine for Mia, who was now leaning on the table with her chin in her hands, smiling dreamily. "You two make love look so peaceful," she said quietly. Evelyn looked at Daniel, who smiled back. "Peaceful," he repeated with a grin. "We've had our share of storms." "Maybe that's what makes it peaceful now," Lucas said suddenly, his deep voice cutting gently through the quiet. It was one of the few times he had spoken all night. His eyes were calm but searching, like he was trying to understand something beyond words. There was a pause after that, not awkward but full of meaning. The kind of pause where no one wants to move because the air feels heavy with truth. Evelyn realized that the four of them were sharing something rare. Not gossip, not small talk, but the raw feeling of being seen. Mia broke the silence with a small laugh. "You know what's funny?" she said, playing with the rim of her glass. "When we first started dating, Lucas and I used to watch couples like you two and wonder if love like that was real. If people could really stay that close after years." Daniel leaned forward slightly, his tone gentle. "It's real, but it takes work and patience. And sometimes letting someone see the messy parts." Evelyn nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. For years, She and Daniel had kept their love quiet, private, almost hidden. But tonight, being open, being seen, didn't feel wrong. It felt freeing. Lucas tilted his head, still watching them. "You two have something rare," he said softly. "Something people notice, even when you're not saying anything." The way he said it made Evelyn blush. She looked at Daniel, who simply smiled and reached for her hand. "That's kind of you to say," he replied. Squeezing her fingers gently, the conversation drifted after that. But the energy in the room stayed different, closer, deeper. They talked about old memories, the times they almost broke apart, and the moments that brought them back together. Mia listened with wide eyes, her smile fading into something softer, almost emotional. As the clock crept past 10, the candles had burned low, casting the room in a golden glow. The rain started again, tapping gently against the glass. Evelyn felt a wave of calm wash over her. She looked around her friends, her partner, the warm room, and realized that love wasn't just about two people. Sometimes it was about being witnessed, being understood by others who recognized the same feeling. When Lucas finally stood up to leave, he smiled at Daniel and said, "You two are something else to watch." Evelyn's breath caught for a second. The words were simple, yet they carried a quiet weight. She smiled back, unsure what to say. Daniel just laughed lightly, slipping his arm around her shoulders. "We're glad you came," he said. As they left, Mia hugged Evelyn tightly. "Don't ever hide that kind of love," she whispered. When the door finally closed and the apartment fell silent, Evelyn leaned against Daniel's shoulder. "That was different," she said softly. Daniel nodded, brushing her hair back. "Yeah, but maybe we needed that." Outside, the rain faded again, leaving the city glimmering under the streetlights. Inside, Evelyn and Daniel sat together in the soft afterglow of the night scene. Understood and somehow more connected than before. For the first time in a long while, Evelyn didn't feel like love needed to be hidden. Maybe, she thought as she closed her eyes, some love stories are meant to be seen. Clean, mature romantic tone, save for YouTube monetization. No explicit or suggestive material. Emotional storytelling with subtle tension and emotional depth. Part 2. What they saw extended 1,000 words the next evening. Evelyn woke to soft sunlight streaming through the blinds. The night before still lingered in her mind. The laughter, the quiet stares, the strange feeling that something deeper had passed between them all. She tried to shake it off as just a good dinner. But something about Mia's words, "You two make love look peaceful," stayed with her. Love wasn't something she often thought about in that way anymore. Life had become practical. Work, bills, routines. But last night reminded her of what it once felt like to be seen. Not for how she looked, but for how she loved. By the afternoon, Mia texted again. "Lucas can't stop talking about last night. You two should come over for dinner this time." Evelyn smiled when she read it. Daniel agreed easily. "Let's go," he said, almost as if he had been waiting for the invitation. That night, the four of them met again, this time at Mia and Lucas's townhouse. It was cozy plants by the window, soft lighting, music humming quietly in the background. The scent of roasted vegetables filled the air. There was something warm and personal about their space. Like it held their personalities, creative, a little messy, but full of life. They settled on the couch after dinner, sipping wine. Conversation flowed lighter this time, full of laughter and teasing. But underneath the easy talk was a quiet undercurrent. A shared understanding that what had happened last night had changed how they saw each other. They weren't just friends now. They were witnesses to something honest, something tender. Evelyn noticed how Mia watched her and Daniel as they spoke, not in judgment, but in fascination. Lucas, too, seemed unusually reflective, his eyes following their small gestures, the way Daniel would rest his hand on Evelyn's knee, or the way she leaned slightly closer when he spoke. It wasn't about romance. It was about energy, a connection that filled the room without words. At one point, Mia smiled softly. "You know, when we got home last night, we talked about how rare it is to see a couple. So genuine. You don't pretend." You don't hide when things get uncomfortable. Daniel nodded, his voice calm. I think that's what keeps us together. We stopped pretending a long time ago. Lucas leaned forward, curious. How did you do that? Most people only show the good side of love, the easy parts. Evelyn looked at Daniel, then back at them. Because love isn't always easy. But when you stop worrying about how it looks, it starts to feel more real. Mia nodded slowly, her eyes softening. That's brave. There was a pause, gentle, comfortable. The kind where everyone feels safe enough to be quiet. The rain had started again outside, faint against the windows. Evelyn felt an almost cinematic stillness settle over the room. Daniel reached for her hand, his thumb tracing slow circles across her skin. He didn't say anything, but his gesture said everything. That quiet reassurance that she wasn't alone in the moment. That he understood what words couldn't express. Lucas exhaled quietly. That's what I mean, he said. That right there. The way you two communicate without even speaking. Evelyn smiled faintly, her eyes still on Daniel. We've learned to listen in silence, she said softly. Mia laughed lightly, shaking her head. It's beautiful. And a little intimidating, she admitted. They all laughed, but the laughter didn't break the mood. It only deepened it. The room felt smaller now, warmer, as if everyone had stepped closer to something honest. As the evening went on, conversation turned to love itself, what it meant to be truly seen in a world that moves too fast. Lucas spoke about how easy it was to lose touch, to get stuck in daily life and forget to look at the person beside you. Evelyn agreed. You stop looking, and then one day you realize you don't even know what the other person is feeling anymore. Daniel added quietly, that's why nights like this matter. When someone sees you, really sees you, it reminds you that love is alive. Those words stayed in the air. Mia and Lucas exchanged a look, not of envy, but of quiet longing. They weren't watching Evelyn and Daniel because they wanted what they had. They were watching because it reminded them of something they'd once felt too. The four of them fell into an easy rhythm after that. Stories, laughter, little truths that usually stay hidden. Time passed without notice. The rain grew heavier, but no one moved. At one point, the power flickered. The lights dimmed, leaving only the soft golden glow of a single candle on the table. It cast gentle shadows across their faces. Mia smiled at the glow and whispered, "It feels like the world outside doesn't exist right now." Evelyn nodded. Maybe it doesn't need to. There was something deeply human about that moment for people, sharing stories, letting themselves be vulnerable. It wasn't about romance anymore. It was about connection, about the courage to be seen. Lucas spoke again, his voice thoughtful. Do you ever think that maybe love isn't meant to be private all the time? That maybe letting others see it helps keep it real? Evelyn thought about that. Maybe, she said after a pause. Because when someone else witnesses your love, it stops being just about two people. It becomes something bigger, something that reminds everyone watching that real love still exists. Mia smiled, her eyes glistening. That's exactly how it felt last night, she whispered. Like we were being reminded. Daniel squeezed Evelyn's hand again. Then maybe that's the point, he said softly. We let you see us. And maybe we needed you to see us too. The room grew quiet after that, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of emotions that didn't need to be explained. When the rain finally stopped, the clock had slipped past midnight. Mia leaned against Lucas's shoulder, her expression peaceful. I don't know what it is about you two, she said sleepily, but you make love feel possible again. Evelyn smiled at that, her heart swelling with something she couldn't name. It always is, she said gently. You just have to remember to look for it. When it was time to leave, the air outside was cool and fresh. The city lights shimmered against the wet pavement. Evelyn and Daniel walked hand in hand, the sound of their footsteps echoing down the quiet street. She turned to him and said softly, Did you feel that tonight? Like they were seeing something we almost forgot we had. Daniel smiled. Yeah, it reminded me of us, when we were still discovering each other. She nodded, resting her head on his shoulder. Maybe we're still discovering. As they walked on, Evelyn realized something simple but powerful. Sometimes love needs to be witnessed, not by the world, but by hearts that understand. It wasn't about being admired or envied. It was about being seen for what was real. That night, Mia and Lucas sat together too, talking quietly. For the first time in a while, they held hands again without thinking about it. Maybe love was contagious that way, passed on through the quiet courage of those who still believed in it. And somewhere between the laughter, the silence, and the candlelight, for people had shared something unforgettable. A reminder that when love is true, it shines even brighter when others are watching. A fast-paced, emotionally rich continuation fully within YouTube monetization guidelines. Clean, mature, romantic tone with emotional intimacy, but no explicit or inappropriate content. Part 3, The Morning After Extended. 1,000 words. The morning sun poured through the windows, soft and golden, waking Evelyn before the alarm. The apartment was quiet except for the faint hum of the city outside. Daniel was still asleep beside her, one arm stretched lazily across the sheets. For a few moments, she simply lay there, listening to his breathing, her mind replaying the night before, the laughter, the quiet truths. The way Mia and Lucas had looked at them as if seeing love for the first time again. Something had changed in that living room. She couldn't explain it, but she could feel it. She got up, wrapped herself in a sweater, and started the coffee maker. The smell filled the air instantly, warm and familiar. As she poured herself a cup, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Mia. "You two reminded us what love looks like when it's alive. Thank you." Evelyn smiled at the screen, her chest tightening in that quiet, emotional way that comes when something truly matters. Daniel walked in, sleepy-eyed but smiling. "You're up early," he said. She handed him a cup of coffee and nodded. "Couldn't stop thinking about last night." He leaned against the counter. "Me neither. It was different, like we didn't just talk. We shared something real." Evelyn looked out the window where sunlight sparkled against the wet streets. "They saw us, Daniel. Not the version of us we show at dinners or on birthdays. The real us. I didn't realize how rare that is." He nodded slowly. "Maybe that's why it felt so honest. We didn't hide anything." They sat down on the couch, quiet but comfortable. The silence between them wasn't heavy. It was peaceful, like the calm after a long storm. Evelyn remembered Lucas's words from the night before. Maybe letting others see your love helps keep it real. At the time, she hadn't thought much about it, but now it echoed in her mind. After breakfast, she scrolled through old photos of her and Daniel vacations. Birthdays, small moments that had built their years together. In every photo she saw not just two people smiling, but two people who had grown through everything: arguments, distance, forgiveness, laughter. She realized that love wasn't just something you held in private. It was something you carried into the world without even knowing it. By noon, Mia called. "We're going to the park," she said. "You two should come. We can grab coffee and just talk." Evelyn looked at Daniel, who was already reaching for his jacket. "Let's go," he said with a grin. The park was quiet that afternoon. Leaves had started to fall, painting the ground in gold and red. The four of them walked slowly along the path, the air cool and crisp. Mia looked lighter somehow, her usual restlessness replaced by something calm. "You know," she said with a small smile, "last night made me realize how much we stopped noticing each other. Me and Lucas, I mean." Lucas nodded, not defensively, but with quiet honesty. "We got caught up in life. We forgot how to just see." Daniel looked at them both. "That happens to everyone. Love doesn't disappear. Sometimes it just waits for you to notice it again." Evelyn smiled at that. "Exactly. It's like music. It doesn't stop. You just forget to listen." They all sat by the lake, watching the water ripple in the wind. The silence between them was peaceful again, the kind that didn't need filling. For a long while, no one spoke. They just watched the sunlight dance on the surface, the way the wind carried tiny waves across it. Then Mia turned to Evelyn and said softly, "You know what I realized? When you let someone see your love, it reminds them of their own. That's what you did for us." Evelyn felt her throat tighten. "Then maybe it was supposed to happen," she said. "Maybe love isn't just for the people inside it. Maybe it's meant to be shared in small ways, not to show off, but to remind others it's real." Lucas smiled faintly. That's the kind of love the world needs more of. They spent the rest of the afternoon talking about everything: dreams, fears, small regrets, things they wished they'd said sooner. It wasn't heavy, just honest. There was comfort in that kind of truth. The kind, it doesn't fix everything, but makes life feel lighter. When they finally said goodbye, Mia hugged Evelyn tightly. "Don't let that light fade," she whispered. Evelyn promised she wouldn't. That evening, back at their apartment, Evelyn and Daniel sat on the balcony, watching the city glow beneath the setting sun. The air was cool, and the world below buzzed quietly. Daniel turned to her, his voice gentle. "You ever think about how strange it is that love can change people just by being seen?" Evelyn nodded. "Yeah, it's like warmth. It spreads without trying." He smiled. "Then maybe that's what we're supposed to do. Just keep loving and let people see it." The simplicity of his words hit her deeply. For years, she had thought love was something to protect, something fragile that needed walls. But maybe love wasn't meant to be hidden behind doors. Maybe it grew stronger when shared, not in loud displays, but in quiet truths that others could feel. Later that night, she sat at her desk, writing in her journal. "Love isn't about being perfect," she wrote. "It's about being real. It's about letting the world see you, not for what you pretend to be, but for what you truly are." She closed the book and looked at Daniel across the room, reading with a faint smile. She realized how rare it was to have someone who didn't just love her, but understood her, someone who had seen her at her worst and still stayed as the night deepened. She whispered, "You know, when Lucas said, 'You two are something to watch,' I finally understood what he meant." Daniel looked up. "Yeah," she smiled. "He wasn't talking about the way we look. He was talking about the way we see each other." He set the book down, leaned closer, and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, the same quiet gesture he'd done 100 times before. "Then let's never stop seeing," he said softly. "Outside." The city lights flickered like stars, and for a long moment, everything felt still, calm, honest, whole. Evelyn closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of that truth settle inside her. Love didn't need to be loud to be powerful. It didn't need grand gestures or perfect words. Sometimes it was just the quiet understanding between two people and the gentle reminder it gave to anyone watching that real love still existed. When she opened her eyes again, she whispered, almost to herself, they wanted to watch. And maybe they needed to. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't just feel loved, she felt understood. The night closed around them softly. The world outside faded to a calm hum. In that silence, two hearts rested easy, not because they had been seen, but because they had finally learned to let themselves be. Emotionally deep, mature, romantic ending. Clean, non-explicit, and completely safe under YouTube monetization guidelines. Focused on emotion, connection, and reflection suitable for storytelling audiences in the US and Canada.